What if I told you that the person stealing your happiness right now is not your boss, not your ex, not that friend who never texts back, but you? Right now, somewhere in the world, someone is lying awake at 3 in the morning, replaying a conversation that lasted 30 seconds. Someone is refreshing their phone every few minutes, wondering why a message was left unread. Someone just got a compliment from 9 people, but they cannot stop thinking about the one person who said nothing. And the painful part? None of these situations involve actual danger. No one is being physically harmed. Yet the emotional suffering feels absolutely real. Here is the truth most people never hear early enough. The vast majority of your emotional pain does not come from what happens to you. It comes from what you expected to happen and did not. That gap between expectation and reality is where almost all disappointment, frustration, and heartbreak quietly live. And the moment you truly understand this, everything begins to shift. But wait, because what you're about to hear in this video goes far deeper than simple advice like, just stop caring. That advice is useless. You know it. I know it. What you actually need is a completely different operating system for your emotions. One that lets you love without clinging, care without crumbling, and stay genuinely happy without handing the remote control of your mood to every person who walks through your life. In the next few minutes, you are going to discover a set of powerful principles that will fundamentally change the way you experience people, relationships, and most importantly, yourself. These are not motivational cliches. These are real psychological shifts that, once understood, can never be unseen. And fair warning, some of what you hear might be uncomfortable at first, but that discomfort is the exact feeling of an old limiting belief starting to crack. So stay with me. Let us begin. Chapter 1. The House Built on Borrowed Ground. Imagine spending 20 years building a beautiful house. You pour your savings into it. You design every room with care. You plant a garden, paint the walls, and fill the space with memories. Then one morning, you receive a letter informing you that the land was never yours. The owner has decided to take it back. Everything you built, gone. Not because the house was poorly made, but because the foundation was never in your control. This is exactly what happens when you build your happiness on other people. Most of us do this without even realizing it. We wire our emotional state directly into the behavior of the people around us. Think about how your day can completely change based on a single interaction. Your manager gives you a nod of approval during a meeting, and suddenly you feel capable and confident. But 2 hours later, a coworker makes a sarcastic remark, and you spend the rest of the afternoon second-guessing yourself. One text from a close friend makes you feel valued. One unreturned call makes you feel invisible. Notice the pattern. Your emotional state is not being determined by you. It is being determined by a rotating cast of characters who do not even know they have been given that power. And that is the first problem. When you place your happiness in someone else's hands, you are essentially handing them a contract they never signed. They did not agree to be responsible for how you feel today. They did not promise to always say the right thing, to always notice your effort, or to always be available when you need reassurance. Yet when they fail to meet those unspoken expectations, you feel betrayed by a deal that only existed inside your mind. This is not a criticism of who you are. This pattern is deeply human. From childhood, many of us are conditioned to associate our worth with how others respond to us. A parent's praise meant we were good. A teacher's disappointment meant we were failing. A friend group's acceptance meant we belonged. Slowly, we built an internal system that says, I am okay when people treat me well, I am not okay when they do not. But here is what that system misses. People are not stable foundations. They are living, breathing, constantly changing beings with their own fears, moods, bad days, insecurities, and blind spots. The same person who made you feel like the most important person in the room on Tuesday might barely acknowledge you on Thursday. Not because they care less about you, but because they are dealing with something entirely their own. When your happiness depends on this kind of unpredictable source, it will always feel like riding a boat in someone else's storm. Some days the water is calm and everything feels perfect. Other days a wave comes from nowhere and you are suddenly drowning emotionally with no idea why. The shift begins when you realize that your emotional state is your own territory. No one else should have permanent residency there without your conscious permission. This does not mean shutting people out. It does not mean becoming cold or detached in the unhealthy sense. It means slowly, deliberately moving the center of your emotional gravity back inside yourself. When you start doing this, something interesting happens. Compliments still feel good, but they no longer define your self-worth. Criticism still stings, but it no longer sends you into a spiral of self-doubt. Someone's mood no longer dictates your mood. Their silence no longer becomes your anxiety. Your happiness becomes less like a kite being yanked around by the wind and more like a lantern you carry in your own hand. Steady, warm, and entirely yours. This is not something that happens overnight. It is a gradual recalibration. But the first step is simply recognizing the pattern. Ask yourself honestly, how much of my happiness today was decided by me, and how much was decided by how other people behaved toward me? If the answer makes you uncomfortable, good. That discomfort is the starting point of real change. Chapter 2. The Invisible Contracts We Write in Our Heads. There is a specific kind of pain that almost every human being has experienced, but very few can accurately name. It is the pain of unspoken expectations. Let me give you a scenario. You spend an entire weekend helping a friend move into a new apartment. You take time off, drive across town, carry heavy boxes up 3 flights of stairs, and stay until the last piece of furniture is in place. 2 weeks later, you mention to this same friend that you are going through a difficult time and could use some support. They listen briefly, offer a generic response, and change the subject. Suddenly, you feel a sharp sting of disappointment, maybe even resentment. But here is the crucial question. Did your friend actually do something wrong? Or did they simply fail to fulfill an invisible contract that you wrote inside your own mind, one they never read and never agreed to? This is one of the most common sources of emotional suffering in human life. We constantly create unwritten agreements with the people around us. We help someone and silently expect equal effort in return. We show loyalty and silently expect the same loyalty back. We invest emotionally in someone and silently expect them to notice, appreciate, and reciprocate at the exact level we gave. The problem is not that these desires are unreasonable. Wanting appreciation and reciprocity is completely natural. The problem is that we treat these desires as guaranteed outcomes rather than preferences. We do not say, "It would be nice if they responded this way." Instead, deep inside, we believe they should respond this way. And when they do not, we feel cheated. Think about how many arguments in relationships, romantic, family, friendships, are actually about violated expectations rather than real wrongdoing. "You should have known I was upset. You should have called. You should have been there for me the way I was there for you." Each of these statements is built on an assumption that was never communicated and never confirmed. Now, imagine how much lighter life would feel if you approached these situations differently. What if, instead of expecting people to read your mind, you simply expressed what you needed and genuinely accepted that they might not be able to provide it? What if you helped your friend move because you genuinely wanted to help, not because you were making an invisible deposit into an emotional bank account you expected to withdraw from later? This shift in thinking is not easy. It requires you to separate your actions from your expectations. It means learning to do things for the intrinsic value of doing them, rather than for the anticipated reaction of the other person. When you help someone, help because it aligns with who you are, not because you are secretly calculating what you will receive in return. When you care about someone, care because it reflects your values, not because you are investing in a return you expect to collect. This does not mean you should tolerate one-sided relationships. Boundaries are essential, and recognizing when a relationship is consistently draining is important. But there is a critical difference between setting healthy boundaries and silently accumulating resentment because someone failed to meet expectations they were never told about. One of the most freeing realizations in life is this: other people are not thinking about you nearly as much as you think they are. This is not an insult. It is a liberation. That friend who did not offer enough emotional support during your hard time was probably not intentionally being uncaring. They were likely caught up in their own world of worries, responsibilities, and distractions. People are not usually villains in our stories. They are just characters dealing with their own plot. When you start reducing the weight of expectations you silently place on others, your relationships actually improve. Why? Because people can sense when they are being evaluated, measured, and tested, even if you never say a word. That energy creates tension. But when you interact with someone freely, without a hidden scorecard running in the background, the entire dynamic changes. Conversations become more relaxed. Connection feels more genuine. And when someone does show you kindness, appreciation, or loyalty, it feels like a gift, not a debt being repaid. There is a beautiful paradox here. The less you expect from people, the more you tend to receive. Not because you are manipulating the situation, but because relationships function best when they are free from invisible pressure. People naturally gravitate toward connections that feel easy, open, and unforced. When you remove the weight of constant expectation, you create that kind of space. Now, let me be very clear. Reducing expectations is not the same as lowering your standards. Standards are about what you will and will not accept in your life. Expectations are about what you demand others deliver in order for you to feel okay. Standards protect your well-being. Expectations make your well-being dependent on someone else's behavior. You can hold high standards for yourself and your relationships while simultaneously releasing the need for every person to meet every unspoken demand you carry inside your head. In fact, the clearer your standards become, the less you need to rely on expectations, because you have already decided what you will accept, and you are willing to walk away from what does not align without resentment. Here is a simple practice that can change everything. The next time you feel disappointed by someone's behavior, pause for a moment and ask yourself one question. Did I clearly communicate what I needed, or was I expecting them to just know? If the answer is the latter, you have found the real source of your pain. And it is not the other person. It is the invisible contract. When you start tearing up those invisible contracts one by one, you reclaim an enormous amount of emotional energy that was previously being spent on monitoring, measuring, and judging how people behave toward you. That energy can now be redirected toward your own growth, your own goals, and your own peace of mind. And that is a trade worth making every single time. Chapter 3. The Garden You Cannot Force to Bloom. Picture this. You are standing in a garden that you have been tending for months. You planted seeds carefully, watered them every morning, and made sure the soil had everything it needed. But one corner of the garden refuses to grow the way you planned. The roses you imagined are not appearing. Instead, wildflowers are pushing through the dirt, beautiful in their own way, but nothing like the picture you had in mind. Now, you have a choice. You can spend every day frustrated, pulling at the soil, trying to force roses to appear where wildflowers naturally grow, or you can step back, observe what is actually growing, and appreciate it for what it is. This is exactly what happens in most relationships. We walk into friendships, partnerships, and family dynamics carrying a mental blueprint of how people should behave. We expect our partner to express love the way we express it. We expect our friends to prioritize what we prioritize. We expect our family members to understand our perspective without us having to explain it in detail. And when they inevitably behave according to their own nature instead of our blueprint, we feel frustrated, confused, and sometimes even betrayed. But here is the thing no one talks about enough. Every single person you meet has been shaped by a completely different set of experiences than yours. Their childhood was different. Their fears are different. The moments that marked them, the ones that taught them how to love, how to protect themselves, how to trust or distrust, are entirely their own. Two people can grow up in the same neighborhood, attend the same school, and still develop completely different emotional landscapes. When you truly understand this, something shifts. You stop expecting people to operate from your manual because you realize they were never given a copy. They are running on their own software, built from their own life, and it makes no more sense to be angry at them for being who they are than it does to be angry at the wildflowers for not being roses. Now, I want to be careful here because this idea is often misunderstood. Accepting someone for who they are does not mean you must keep everyone in your life regardless of how they treat you. That is not acceptance. That is self-neglect. True acceptance means seeing people clearly without the distortion of your own expectations, and then making conscious decisions about what role they play in your life. Let me give you a practical example. Say you have a friend who is incredibly fun to be around, always full of energy and great conversation, but they are consistently unreliable when it comes to showing up during difficult times. You have two options. Option one is to keep expecting them to suddenly become the person who rushes to your side during a crisis, and keep feeling let down every time they do not. Option two is to accept that this person's strength is companionship during good times, not emotional support during hard times, and adjust your expectations accordingly. You still enjoy the friendship for what it offers. You just stop demanding it to be something it was never designed to be. This is not settling. This is clarity. When you practice this kind of clear-eyed acceptance, an enormous amount of mental energy gets freed up. Think about how much time you have spent trying to change someone, trying to make a quiet person more outgoing, trying to make an emotionally reserved person more expressive, trying to convince a stubborn person to see things your way. How many hours of your life have been poured into that effort? And how many times has it actually worked permanently? The honest answer for most people is almost never. That is because you cannot renovate someone else's mind. You can share your perspective, you can express your needs, and you can set boundaries around what you will and will not accept. But the actual internal change, the rewiring of how someone thinks, feels, and responds, that is work only they can do for themselves, in their own time, for their own reasons. When you stop trying to be the architect of other people's personalities, something remarkable happens. Your frustration decreases dramatically. Resentment loses its grip, and you begin to see people with a kind of compassionate clarity that was impossible before. You start noticing things you missed. The friend who is terrible at remembering birthdays, but always the first to defend you when someone speaks against you. The parent who cannot express emotions verbally, but shows love through quiet, consistent actions. The partner who does not communicate the way you wish they would, but demonstrates commitment in ways you overlooked because you were too focused on what was missing. Acceptance does not make you passive. It makes you perceptive, and perception is far more powerful than control. There is also something deeply peaceful about releasing the need to fix people. When you walk into every interaction without a secret agenda to reshape someone, conversations become lighter. There is less tension, less unspoken frustration, and more genuine connection. You give people room to breathe, and in return, they often show you parts of themselves they were too guarded to reveal before. Think of the people in your own life who make you feel the most comfortable. Chances are, they are the ones who accept you without constantly trying to improve you. They listen without judgment. They appreciate your strengths without obsessing over your flaws. Being around them feels effortless because you sense that you do not have to perform or prove anything. Now imagine being that person for others, not because you are trying to be noble, but because you genuinely understand that everyone is doing the best they can with the internal tools they were given. Some people were given sturdy tools, stable childhoods, emotional education, healthy role models. Others were handed broken instruments and told to build something beautiful. When you see people through this lens, compassion replaces frustration naturally. One final thought on this: acceptance is not a one-time decision. It is a daily practice. You will still have moments where someone's behavior irritates you, where you catch yourself wishing they would just change this one thing. That is normal. The difference is that now you recognize the wish for what it is, a preference, not a requirement. You notice it, you let it pass, and you return to the reality of who that person actually is. And in that return, you find something surprising. Peace. The kind of peace that does not depend on other people being different than they are. The kind that allows you to move through relationships with grace, clarity, and a genuine warmth that comes from understanding rather than control. Chapter 4. Standing on your own 2 feet, emotionally. There is a moment in many people's lives that feels like the emotional equivalent of learning to ride a bicycle without training wheels. It is the moment you realize that you, and only you, are responsible for how you feel. For most of us, this realization does not come easily. It often arrives after a painful experience. A relationship ends, and suddenly the person who was your primary source of joy, comfort, and validation is gone. A friendship dissolves, and you realize how much of your daily emotional stability depended on that one person's presence. A family dynamic shifts, and the safety net you always assumed would be there disappears. In those raw, uncomfortable moments, a powerful truth reveals itself. If one person's absence can completely unravel your emotional world, then your emotional world was never truly yours to begin with. It was rented space, and the landlord just moved on. This is not about blaming yourself for caring deeply. Caring is beautiful. Love is essential. Connection is one of the most meaningful parts of being human. But there is a crucial difference between enjoying someone's presence and needing their presence in order to function emotionally. Let me put it this way. Imagine you are walking through a forest on a clear afternoon. Sunlight filters through the trees, the air is fresh, and you feel completely at peace. Then a friend joins you on the trail. Their company makes the walk even more enjoyable. You laugh together, share stories, and the experience feels richer because they are there. Now imagine a different scenario. You are sitting in a dark room, feeling anxious and unsettled. A friend arrives, and suddenly the room feels brighter. Your anxiety fades. You feel okay again. But the moment they leave, the darkness returns. You are right back where you started, uneasy, incomplete, waiting for someone to come and make things feel bearable again. The first scenario is healthy connection. The second is emotional dependence. In the first, you were already at peace. Your friend's presence enhanced an experience that was already good. In the second, your friend's presence was the only thing standing between you and emotional discomfort. That is an enormous amount of pressure to place on another human being, and most of the time, they do not even know they are carrying it. Emotional dependence usually does not announce itself loudly. It sneaks in through the back door. It starts with small things. You check your phone more often than you would like, hoping for a message. You feel a slight pang of worry when someone takes longer than usual to respond. You adjust your plans, your opinions, or even your personality slightly depending on who you are around, because some part of you believes that being yourself might not be enough to keep them close. Over time, these small adjustments accumulate. Your emotional thermostat is no longer set by you. It is set by whoever happens to be in the room, and that is an exhausting way to live. The path toward emotional independence is not about hardening yourself or building walls around your heart. It is about building a floor beneath your own feet, a floor that holds you steady, no matter who walks into the room or out of it. This floor is built through self-trust. It is the quiet confidence that says, I value this person's presence in my life, but if circumstances change, I will still be standing. It is the understanding that your worth does not fluctuate based on who is paying attention to you at any given moment. You were valuable before they arrived. You remain valuable after they leave. One of the most noticeable changes that happens when you develop emotional independence is the way your relationships transform. When you stop needing people to fill an emotional void, you start choosing people based on genuine compatibility rather than emotional hunger. You no longer stay in situations that drain you simply because you are afraid of the emptiness that might follow. You no longer tolerate behavior that disrespects you because the thought of being alone feels worse than the pain of being mistreated. Instead, your relationships become choices rather than crutches. You spend time with people because you genuinely enjoy who they are, not because you need them to regulate your emotions. And here is the beautiful irony. This is exactly when relationships become their best. When two people come together out of desire rather than desperation, the connection is lighter, more authentic, and far more sustainable. Think about the relationships in your life that feel the most balanced and nourishing. I am willing to bet they are the ones where neither person is clinging to the other. Both individuals have their own sense of identity, their own interests, and their own inner stability. They enhance each other's lives without becoming each other's entire world. That balance is not accidental. It is the natural result of two emotionally independent people choosing to share their time. Now, building this kind of independence is a process, and it starts with one fundamental question. What do I actually enjoy when no one is watching? This might sound like a simple question, but for many people, it is surprisingly difficult to answer. They have spent so long defining themselves through their relationships and through other people's perceptions that they have lost touch with what genuinely makes them feel alive. Their hobbies, their interests, their passions, everything has been filtered through the lens of whether it is impressive enough, acceptable enough, or interesting enough for others. Emotional independence begins when you start rediscovering yourself outside of other people's gaze. It means trying new things without needing approval. It means sitting with your own thoughts without immediately reaching for distraction. It means developing a relationship with yourself that is just as intentional and nurturing as the relationships you build with others. And when you do this, when you take the time to understand your own mind, your own values, and your own emotional patterns, something powerful starts to emerge, a quiet, inner stability that does not shake every time someone changes their behavior toward you. This stability is not loudness. It is not arrogance. It is not the aggressive, I don't need anyone attitude that is often mistaken for independence. Real emotional independence is calm. It is the person who listens without becoming defensive, the person who can receive criticism without spiraling, the person who can watch someone walk away and feel sadness without feeling destroyed. It is the ability to hold two truths at the same time. I wish things were different, and I am going to be okay regardless. That ability To sit with discomfort without being consumed by it is one of the most underrated forms of strength a human being can develop. It does not make headlines. It does not win arguments, but it quietly shapes the foundation of a peaceful, self-directed life. Let me leave you with an image. Think of a lighthouse. It stands at the edge of a coastline, exposed to storms, wind, rain, and the unpredictable behavior of the sea. Ships come and go. Some stay close for a while. Others pass by without stopping. The lighthouse does not chase any of them. It does not dim its light when a ship sails away. It does not shine brighter to attract more attention. It simply stands, steady and consistent, offering its light to whoever happens to be near. That is emotional independence. You are the lighthouse. Your light comes from within. People will come and go. Some will stay, some will drift, and through all of it, your light remains yours, steady, unwavering, and completely independent of the sea. When you reach this place, when your peace no longer depends on who is standing next to you, relationships stop being a source of anxiety and become a source of genuine enjoyment. You love more freely because you are no longer afraid of losing. You give more openly because you are not secretly keeping score. And your happiness finally becomes something that belongs entirely to you. Chapter 5. Not every storm is about you. Let me tell you something that might sting a little at first, but will free you the moment it truly sinks in. Most of the time, it is not about you. That sharp tone your colleague used this morning? Probably not about you. The friend who has been distant for the past 2 weeks? Likely not about you. The family member who snapped during a dinner? Almost certainly not about you. That person who left your message unread for 2 days? There is a very strong chance that it had absolutely nothing to do with you. But your mind does not believe that, does it? The human mind has a peculiar habit. It takes everything personally. It is like a radar system that is permanently tuned to one frequency. What does this mean about me? Someone cancels plans and the mind immediately whispers they do not want to spend time with you. A conversation feels shorter than usual, and the mind concludes they are upset with you. Someone does not laugh at your joke, and suddenly the mind is replaying the moment for the next 3 hours, analyzing every possible reason why. This habit is exhausting, and the worst part is that most of the time, the stories your mind creates have nothing to do with reality. Here is what is actually happening beneath the surface. Every single person you interact with is carrying an invisible world inside them. They are carrying deadlines they are worried about, health concerns they have not shared, financial stress they are hiding, relationship problems they are processing, childhood wounds they have never fully healed from, and 1,000 small anxieties that have absolutely nothing to do with you. When someone acts cold, distracted, or short-tempered, you are almost always witnessing the overflow of their internal world, not a deliberate judgment of yours. Think of it this way. Imagine you are walking down a busy street and someone accidentally bumps into you without apologizing. Your first instinct might be to feel offended. How rude! They did not even acknowledge me. But what if you later learned that this person had just received devastating news? What if they were rushing to a hospital? What if their mind was so consumed by their own crisis that they genuinely did not register the physical contact? Your feelings of being disrespected would instantly dissolve, right? Not because the bump did not happen, but because you suddenly understood the context. The action was the same. The only thing that changed was your interpretation. This is the power of perspective. And this is exactly what detachment teaches you to practice in everyday life. Pausing before your mind writes a story and giving space for a more accurate interpretation to emerge. Now, I am not suggesting you become a doormat. I am not saying that every hurtful action should be excused with, "Oh, they must be going through something." Some behavior is genuinely disrespectful, and you should absolutely recognize it and respond with appropriate boundaries. The distinction I am drawing is between real mistreatment and imagined slights, between someone deliberately causing harm and someone simply being human on a difficult day. Most of the things we take personally fall into the second category, and when you start recognizing that, an incredible weight lifts off your shoulders. Let me give you a real-world example of how this plays out. Imagine you post something online, maybe a photo, a thought, a piece of work you're proud of. Several people respond positively, but one person leaves a dismissive comment. Now, rationally, you received far more positive feedback than negative. But which response does your mind fixate on? The negative one. You might spend the rest of the evening thinking about that single comment, analyzing who wrote it and why, wondering what you did wrong. But consider this. That person who left the negative comment might have been scrolling through their phone after a terrible day. They might be someone who habitually projects their dissatisfaction onto everything they encounter. Their comment might reveal far more about their own emotional state than it does about the quality of what you shared. You simply happen to be in their line of fire. When you begin to see negative reactions through this lens, they lose their power. Not because you stop caring about feedback, but because you develop the ability to evaluate feedback without absorbing it as truth. There is a phrase that captures this beautifully. What other people think of you is none of your business. The first time you hear it, it sounds almost dismissive. But sit with it for a moment and you start to feel its wisdom. Other people's opinions are shaped by their own experiences, their own insecurities, their own values, and their own current mood. Those opinions will change tomorrow, next week, or the moment their circumstances shift. Building your identity on something so fluid is like trying to write your name in running water. One of the most powerful skills you can develop is the ability to pause between stimulus and response. Between the moment something happens and the moment you react, there is a tiny gap. Most people never notice this gap because they have been reacting automatically for so long that it feels instantaneous. Something happens, emotion fires, reaction follows. It feels like a single event, but it is actually 3 separate steps. Detachment lives in that gap. When you train yourself to notice the space between what happens and how you respond, you gain something invaluable, the power of choice. Instead of automatically assuming that a friend's silence means rejection, you pause and consider other possibilities. Instead of spiraling into self-doubt because someone was curt with you, you take a breath and remind yourself that their behavior is a reflection of their world, not a verdict on yours. Over time, this practice transforms your emotional landscape. Situations that once triggered hours of overthinking begin to pass through your mind like clouds. You notice them, you observe them, and then you let them move on. The emotional charge they once carried fades, not because you have become numb, but because you have become wiser about what actually deserves your emotional energy. And here is the beautiful result. When you stop taking everything personally, you become significantly more pleasant to be around. Conversations with you feel safe because people sense that they do not have to walk on eggshells. Friendships with you feel easier because misunderstandings get resolved quickly instead of festering into resentment. Your presence becomes a calming force rather than a reactive one. You also gain clarity. When you are not constantly interpreting every micro-expression and every tone of voice as a personal message, your mind has space to focus on things that genuinely matter. Your goals, your growth, your creative energy, all of it gets more room to breathe when you stop spending mental bandwidth on imagined slights. So the next time someone behaves in a way that triggers that familiar sting, try something different. Instead of asking, "What did I do wrong?" ask, "What might they be carrying right now that I cannot see?" You will be surprised how often the answer has absolutely nothing to do with you. And in that realization, you will find a freedom that no amount of external validation could ever provide. Chapter 6. The Room Where You Meet Yourself. There is a room that most people avoid their entire lives. It has no television, no notifications, no background music, and no other people. It is completely silent. The only thing in this room is you and your own thoughts. For many people, this room is terrifying. We live in an age of constant noise. From the moment we open our eyes in the morning, there is something demanding our attention. A phone buzzing with notifications, a news feed scrolling with updates, a playlist filling the silence, a conversation filling the space. We move from one source of stimulation to the next with barely a pause in between, and most of us do this so automatically that we never stop to ask a simple question: what am I running from? Because that is what it often is, running. Not toward something, but away from something, away from the quiet, away from the thoughts that surface when there is nothing to distract you, away from the uncomfortable encounter with your own inner world. And yet, that inner world is exactly where your deepest growth is waiting. There is an important difference between being alone and feeling lonely, and most people never learn to separate the two. Loneliness is the aching sense that something is missing. It is the belief that you need someone else's presence in order to feel whole. Solitude is something entirely different. Solitude is the conscious choice to spend time with yourself, not because no one else is available, but because you recognize the value of your own company. Loneliness says, "I am incomplete without others." Solitude says, "I am complete, and I choose to enjoy this completeness in quiet." The reason so many people fear being alone is that silence forces confrontation. When the noise stops, your mind does not go quiet. It gets louder. Thoughts you have been suppressing begin to surface. Emotions you have been avoiding start knocking on the door. Questions you have been postponing about your choices, your direction, your relationships, your purpose suddenly demand attention. This is uncomfortable, but it is also where the most important work of your life happens. When you sit with yourself long enough, you begin to notice patterns that were previously invisible. You notice the recurring thoughts that shape your mood. You notice the emotional triggers that send you into spiraling reactions. You notice the beliefs about yourself that you have been carrying since childhood, beliefs that may no longer be true but continue to influence your decisions every single day. This kind of self-awareness is not available in a crowded room. It does not arrive during a group conversation or while scrolling through social media. It only appears in the stillness, and once it appears, it becomes the foundation for genuine personal transformation. Think of solitude as a mirror that only works in silence. In the noise of daily life, this mirror stays fogged up. You catch glimpses of yourself, but never the full picture. When you sit alone in a quiet space, without distractions, without performance, without anyone to impress, the fog clears, and what you see might surprise you. You might discover that some of the goals you have been chasing were never really yours. They were inherited expectations from parents, society, or peers. You might realize that certain relationships in your life have been draining you for years, but you stayed because the fear of solitude seemed worse than the pain of staying. You might notice that you have been so busy curating an image for others that you forgot what your authentic self actually looks like. These discoveries are not always comfortable, but they are always valuable. There is another dimension to solitude that often goes unrecognized. It strengthens your emotional immune system. When you learn to sit comfortably with your own thoughts, you develop a tolerance for discomfort that most people never build. The anxious feeling that once drove you to immediately call someone or scroll through your phone begins to settle. The restless need to always be occupied starts to fade. In its place, a quiet confidence emerges, the kind that comes from knowing you can handle your own inner world without needing constant external support. This confidence changes everything. It changes how you enter relationships because you are no longer entering them from a place of emotional deficit. It changes how you handle conflict because you are no longer terrified of the silence that might follow a disagreement. It changes how you make decisions because you are no longer basing them on what will earn the most approval. Solitude also has a surprising effect on the quality of your relationships. This might sound counterintuitive. How can spending more time alone improve your connections with others? But the logic is simple. When you are comfortable being alone, you stop clinging to relationships out of fear. You stop staying in situations that harm you just because the alternative feels empty. You become more selective, not out of arrogance, but out of self-respect. The relationships that remain in your life are the ones that genuinely add value, and the ones that consistently subtract from your peace naturally fall away. I have noticed something fascinating about people who have mastered the art of solitude. They tend to be the best listeners. They tend to be the calmest presences in a room. They tend to be the ones who speak less but say more. This is not a coincidence. When you spend time regularly with your own thoughts, you develop a depth that cannot be manufactured through constant socializing. You bring something richer to every conversation because you have actually spent time thinking rather than just reacting. Now, let me address a common misconception. Embracing solitude does not mean becoming a hermit. It does not mean canceling plans, avoiding people, or retreating from the world. It simply means building a healthy relationship with the experience of being alone. Some people might need 30 minutes of quiet time in the morning. Others might benefit from a solo walk in the evening. Some might find their solitude in a weekend spent without social obligations. The form does not matter nearly as much as the intention behind it. The intention is this: to return to yourself, to reconnect with the person you are when no one is watching, no one is evaluating, and no one is expecting anything from you. That person, the unfiltered, unperformed version of you, is the one worth getting to know. There is a quiet revolution that happens when you befriend your own solitude. The desperate need to fill every moment with stimulation begins to dissolve. The fear of missing out gradually loses its grip. The compulsive need to check whether people are thinking about you starts to fade. In their place, a strange and beautiful calm takes root. You start enjoying a cup of coffee in silence without reaching for your phone. You start noticing details in the world around you. The light shifting through a window, the sound of rain, the simple pleasure of breathing without urgency. These are not dramatic experiences. They will never go viral on social media, but they carry a depth of contentment that no amount of external validation can match. And perhaps the most profound gift of solitude is this: it teaches you that you are enough. Not in the motivational poster sense of the phrase, but in the deeply felt experiential sense. When you can sit alone in complete silence and feel genuinely okay, not distracted, not numbed, not performing, you have discovered something that millions of people spend their entire lives searching for in other people. You have discovered that the peace you were looking for was never outside the room. It was always waiting inside it, inside the silence, inside yourself. All you had to do was stop running long enough to find it. Chapter 7. The Well That Never Runs Dry. There is an ancient parable about a traveler crossing a vast desert. For days he searched for water, dragging himself from one dried-up riverbed to another, convinced that relief was always just beyond the next dune. He passed through villages, asked strangers for directions to the nearest oasis, and followed every rumor of a hidden spring. Each time he arrived at a new location, he found either nothing or a shallow puddle that dried up within hours. Exhausted and nearly broken, he collapsed beneath the shade of a lone tree. And it was there, in his stillness, that he noticed something. The ground beneath him was slightly damp. He began to dig, slowly, with his bare hands, and within minutes, clear water began to rise from below. The well had been beneath his feet the entire time. He had spent days searching the horizon for something that was directly underneath him. This is the story of how most people search for happiness. We look for it in the next promotion, in the next relationship, in the next purchase, in the next milestone. We genuinely believe that happiness is a destination, a place we will arrive at once the right conditions line up. I will be happy when I finally get that raise. I will feel at peace once I find the right partner. Everything will feel complete once I move to a new city. The language is always future tense. Happiness is always somewhere ahead, waiting for us to catch up. And sometimes we do catch up. We get the promotion, we find the relationship, we buy the thing we wanted, and for a brief, beautiful moment, it feels exactly like we imagined. The relief washes over us. The excitement fills the room. We think, this is it. I finally made it. But then something predictable happens. The feeling fades. The promotion comes with new pressures. The relationship introduces new complexities. The new purchase becomes ordinary, and the mind, restless as ever, begins scanning the horizon again. Okay, but once I achieve the next thing, then I will really be happy. This is not a character flaw. This is the mind doing what it was designed to do, constantly seeking, constantly evaluating, constantly comparing. The human brain evolved to solve problems and anticipate threats, not to sit in quiet contentment. So when you achieve something, the brain does not say, "Wonderful, let us rest here forever." It says, "Good, now what is next?" And the cycle continues. The breakthrough comes when you stop blaming the world for not delivering lasting happiness and start recognizing that lasting happiness was never meant to come from the world in the first place. This does not mean external experiences are meaningless. A beautiful sunset, a meaningful conversation, a professional achievement, a moment of genuine connection. These things enrich life enormously, but they are additions to happiness, not the source of it. They are sunlight landing on a house that must already have its own foundation. Without that foundation, the sunlight comes and goes, and you are left standing in the dark every time clouds roll in. So where is the foundation? It is in your relationship with your own mind. Most people have a deeply adversarial relationship with their own thoughts. They spend enormous energy fighting their mind, suppressing uncomfortable feelings, avoiding difficult truths, distracting themselves from inner noise. But happiness grows when you stop fighting your inner world and start understanding it. This begins with a deceptively simple practice: observation. Instead of immediately reacting to every thought and emotion that arises, you pause and watch. You notice the worry without feeding it. You acknowledge the frustration without letting it steer your actions. You observe the comparison without accepting it as truth. Over time, this practice creates a small but crucial distance between you and your thoughts. You begin to realize that you are not your thoughts. You are the one watching them. That distinction changes everything. When you are your thoughts, every worry feels like a prophecy. Every insecurity feels like a fact. Every fear feels like a certainty. But when you are the observer of your thoughts, you gain the ability to evaluate them. Is this worry based on evidence, or is my mind creating a worst-case scenario? Is this insecurity rooted in reality, or is it an old story I have been telling myself for years? Is this fear pointing to a genuine danger, or is it simply discomfort disguised as threat? This is where true inner happiness begins, not in positive thinking, not in forced optimism, but in the clear-eyed ability to see your own mind without being controlled by it. Another essential ingredient of inner happiness is gratitude, but not the shallow, performative kind. Not the kind where you write a list every morning because someone told you it would fix your life. I mean the kind of gratitude that emerges naturally when you genuinely slow down and notice what is already here. Right now, at this very moment, there are things in your life that a previous version of you desperately prayed for: a roof over your head, a body that carries you through each day, people who would notice if you disappeared, a mind capable of learning, growing, and creating. These things are so constant that they become invisible, like the hum of an air conditioner that you only notice when it stops. Gratitude is the practice of noticing before it stops. It is training your attention to land on what is present rather than what is absent. And when you do this consistently, not perfectly, just consistently, your experience of daily life shifts in ways that are difficult to describe but impossible to miss once they begin. Chapter 8. Caring without crumbling. Now, here is where many people get stuck. They hear the word detachment, and they picture a cold, emotionless person sitting on a mountain somewhere, indifferent to everything and everyone. They imagine someone who has turned off their feelings like a faucet and drifts through life without genuine connection. Let me be very clear. That is not detachment. That is emotional shutdown, and it is just as unhealthy as emotional dependence, sometimes more so. True detachment is not the absence of feeling. It is the presence of balance. It is the ability to care deeply without being destroyed by the outcome. It is loving someone fully while accepting that you cannot control their choices. It is investing in a goal wholeheartedly while understanding that the result is never entirely in your hands. It is holding things with open palms instead of clenched fists. Think about the difference between holding a bird in a clenched fist versus holding it in an open hand. In the clenched fist, you might keep the bird from flying away, but you risk crushing it. In the open hand, the bird is free. It might stay. It might fly. But whatever it does so naturally. And your hand remains relaxed, uninjured, and open to receive whatever comes next. This is the emotional posture of healthy detachment. You remain open. You remain caring. You remain fully human. But you release the desperate grip that says, "This must go exactly the way I need it to, or I will fall apart." One of the most common confusions people have is between attachment and love. They sound similar, but they operate in completely opposite ways. Attachment says, "I need you to behave a certain way so that I can feel secure." Love says, "I appreciate who you are, and my peace does not depend on you being exactly who I want you to be." Attachment creates anxiety. Constant monitoring, analyzing, worrying about whether the other person still feels the same way. Love creates spaciousness, room for both people to grow, change, and evolve without the relationship becoming a cage. Attachment says, "If you leave, I will be broken." Love says, "If you leave, I will feel pain, but I will still be whole." When you practice detachment within your relationships, something paradoxical happens. Your connections actually become deeper. Why? Because people can feel when they are being held too tightly. They can sense the invisible pressure of someone who needs them in order to feel okay. And that pressure, even when it comes from a place of genuine love, often pushes people away rather than drawing them closer. But when you show up in a relationship as someone who is already emotionally complete, someone who chooses to be there rather than someone who needs to be there, the entire energy shifts. There is no desperation, no constant testing, no silent scorekeeping, just two people sharing their lives because they genuinely want to, not because they are afraid of what happens if they stop. Detachment also transforms how you handle conflict. When you are deeply attached to a specific outcome, every disagreement feels like a threat to your emotional survival. A simple argument becomes a catastrophe because your mind interprets it as a potential loss of the thing you depend on for stability. But when your emotional foundation is internal rather than external, conflict becomes manageable. Disagreements are just disagreements, not existential crises. You can listen without becoming defensive. You can express your perspective without needing to win. You can even walk away from a conversation temporarily, knowing that your inner peace does not depend on immediate resolution. Perhaps the most beautiful thing about healthy detachment is that it actually increases compassion. When you are not overwhelmed by your own emotional turbulence, you have more capacity to notice what others are going through. You listen more carefully because you are not mentally drafting your defense while they speak. You respond more thoughtfully because you are not reacting from a place of fear or insecurity. You become a safer person to be vulnerable around, which is one of the greatest gifts you can offer anyone. Detachment does not make you less human. It makes you more human, in the truest, most grounded sense of the word. Chapter 9. Releasing the steering wheel. There is a specific kind of exhaustion that does not come from physical labor. It does not come from working long hours or pushing your body to its limits. It comes from the relentless mental effort of trying to control everything. Every day, millions of people wake up and immediately begin managing the universe. They try to control how their morning goes. They try to control how traffic moves. They try to control how their coworker responds to an email. They try to control whether their partner is in a good mood. They try to control how a meeting will unfold, how a project will be received, how a conversation will end. And every single day the universe gently, or sometimes not so gently, reminds them that they are not in charge of most of it. The need to control is one of the deepest sources of anxiety in modern life. It is rooted in a very understandable desire, the desire for safety. If I can predict what happens next, I can protect myself from pain. If I can manage every variable, I can prevent disappointment. If I can steer every outcome, I can guarantee my happiness. But life was never designed to be fully steerable. It is more like a river than a highway. A highway has lanes, traffic signals, and predictable routes. A river has currents, bends, and unexpected obstacles. You can navigate a river skillfully, but you cannot dictate where the water flows. The moment you try, you exhaust yourself fighting a force that is infinitely larger than you. Letting go of control does not mean drifting passively through life. It does not mean abandoning effort, ambition, or responsibility. It means learning to distinguish between what is your oar and what is the current. Your oar is your effort, your choices, your attitude, and your daily actions. The current is everything else. Other people's decisions, economic shifts, timing, luck, and the countless invisible factors that shape outcomes in ways you cannot predict. When you focus exclusively on your oar and release your obsession with the current, something remarkable happens. Stress decreases, not because life gets easier, but because you stop carrying weight that was never yours to lift. You still row with purpose and direction, but you no longer exhaust yourself trying to rearrange the entire river. One of the most powerful areas where this shift matters is in how people perceive you. So many of us spend enormous energy curating a specific image. We carefully manage what we say, how we appear, and what others think of us. We rehearse conversations in advance. We analyze interactions after they end. We adjust our personality depending on who is in the room, always trying to control the narrative of how we are perceived. But here is the liberating truth. You cannot control perception. Two people can witness the exact same version of you and form completely opposite opinions. One will admire your confidence, the other will call it arrogance. One will appreciate your honesty, the other will find it abrasive. No matter how carefully you perform, you will never create a version of yourself that everyone approves of. When you accept this, truly, deeply accept it, an enormous burden lifts. You stop performing and start living. You say what you actually think instead of what you calculate will be best received. You pursue what genuinely interests you instead of what looks impressive. You become less concerned with applause and more connected to purpose. Letting go of control also transforms your relationship with failure. When you believe you must control every outcome, failure feels personal. It feels like proof that you were not smart enough, not careful enough, not good enough. But when you understand that outcomes involve countless factors beyond your control, failure becomes data rather than identity. It becomes feedback rather than verdict. You analyze what happened, extract the lesson, and keep moving, without the emotional devastation that comes from believing you should have been able to prevent it. There is also a quiet beauty that appears when you stop gripping life so tightly. You begin to notice opportunities you would have missed in your tunnel vision pursuit of a specific outcome. Unexpected conversations lead to unexpected ideas. Unplanned detours lead to unexpected discoveries. Moments of stillness lead to insights that no amount of forced productivity could have generated. Many people look back on the most meaningful turning points of their lives and realize they were completely unplanned. The job they almost did not apply for, the person they met by accident, the failure that redirected them toward something better. These moments were not controlled. They were allowed. And they happened precisely because life was given room to move in directions that the mind never anticipated. So here is my invitation to you. Loosen the grip, not on your values. Hold those tightly, not on your effort. Bring that fully. But loosen the grip on the outcomes, the perceptions, and the thousand small variables that were never yours to manage in the first place. Let the river carry you where it will, and trust that your ability to navigate is more than enough to handle whatever bend comes next. Because the truth is, you have already survived every unexpected moment that has ever appeared in your life. Every single one. And that track record is the only proof you need that you can handle what comes next, even without controlling it. Chapter 10. The Unlocked Door. There is a story about a prisoner who spent years inside a cell, miserable and defeated. Every day he sat on the cold floor, staring at the heavy door in front of him, convinced it was locked. He never touched the handle. He never pushed against the frame. He simply assumed, because he had always been told, that the door was sealed shut and there was no way out. One afternoon, a gust of wind swept through the corridor and the door swung open. It had never been locked, not once. The entire time he sat in that cell, freedom was one push away. But because he believed the door was locked, he never tried. This is how many people live their entire emotional lives. They sit inside a prison of dependence, dependent on approval, dependent on validation, dependent on the constant reassurance that someone out there thinks they are enough. And the entire time, the door to emotional freedom is right in front of them, unlocked, waiting to be pushed open. But they never push, because somewhere along the way they were taught to believe that happiness must come from the outside, that it must be earned through other people's opinions, that it must be confirmed by someone else before it can feel real. The moment you push that door open, the moment you decide that your happiness is yours and no one else gets to hold the key, everything transforms. Let me describe what this transformation actually feels like in daily life, because it is not some abstract spiritual concept. It is practical, it is tangible, and once it begins, you will notice it everywhere. First, the constant background noise in your mind starts to quiet down. You know that noise, the running commentary that analyzes every interaction, measures every reaction, and keeps score of who said what and what it might mean. That noise exists because your mind is constantly scanning for evidence of your worth. Did they like what I said? Did they notice my effort? Are they pulling away? Am I still valued? When your happiness no longer depends on these answers, the scanning stops. Not overnight, but gradually. And in its place, a calm settles that feels foreign at first, but quickly becomes the most natural thing in the world. Second, your relationships undergo a quiet revolution. When you interact with people from a place of inner completeness rather than emotional hunger, the dynamic shifts entirely. You stop overanalyzing text messages. You stop reading hidden meanings into casual comments. You stop performing a version of yourself that you think others want to see. Instead, you simply show up, honest, relaxed, and unbothered by whether everyone in the room approves of you. And here is what is fascinating. People respond to this energy, not because you are trying to impress them, but precisely because you are not. There is something magnetic about a person who is genuinely comfortable in their own skin. Not arrogant, not dismissive, just settled. People trust that energy because it feels real in a world full of performance. Third, disappointment changes shape. It does not disappear. You are still human, and painful things still hurt. But the duration changes. The intensity changes. Where a rejection might have consumed you for weeks, it now stings for a day and then releases. Where a misunderstanding might have spiraled into a full emotional crisis, it now registers as a momentary discomfort that you process and move through. Your recovery time shortens dramatically because your emotional immune system has been strengthened by the one thing that strengthens it most, the knowledge that you will be fine regardless. This is not emotional suppression. You are not pushing feelings down or pretending they do not exist. You are feeling them fully, but you are no longer drowning in them. There is a world of difference between experiencing a wave and being swept out to sea by it. Emotional independence teaches you to stand in the water, feel the wave hit your chest, acknowledge its force, and remain on your feet as it passes. Fourth, and this one surprises most people, your ambition actually increases. Many people fear that if they stop seeking external validation, they will lose motivation. If I stop caring what people think, what will drive me? But the opposite happens. When your motivation shifts from proving yourself to expressing yourself, your energy becomes cleaner and more sustainable. You pursue goals because they matter to you, not because they will impress someone else. You create because the act of creating fulfills you, not because the applause completes you. This kind of motivation does not burn out the way approval-seeking does. because it is fueled by internal meaning rather than external reaction. Chapter 11. The Quiet Fire. In a world that rewards loudness, loud opinions, loud achievements, loud emotions, loud everything, inner peace can seem almost invisible. It does not trend on social media. It does not win awards. It does not announce itself when it enters a room. And because of this, many people underestimate its power. But make no mistake, inner peace is not passive. It is one of the most active, disciplined, and powerful states a human being can cultivate. It just happens to operate quietly. Think about the people in your life or in history who genuinely impressed you. Not the ones who shouted the loudest or demanded the most attention, but the ones who carried a stillness that made everything around them feel calmer. The friend who listened without interrupting and somehow made you feel heard in a way no one else could. The mentor who responded to chaos with a steady voice and clear thinking. The person who received terrible news and, instead of falling apart publicly, took a breath, gathered themselves, and moved forward with remarkable composure. That composure is not an absence of feeling. It is the result of an inner world that has been carefully tended, like a fire that burns steadily rather than wildly. A wildfire is dramatic and attention-grabbing, but it destroys everything in its path and eventually burns itself out. A quiet fire, the kind inside a well-built hearth, provides consistent warmth, lasts through the night, and can be sustained indefinitely. Inner peace is that quiet fire. Building it requires something that modern culture rarely encourages: the willingness to slow down. We live in a world that equates busyness with importance and constant stimulation with fulfillment. If you are not busy, you must not be ambitious. If you are not reacting, you must not care. If you are not constantly engaged with something or someone, you must be missing out. But the people who have cultivated genuine inner peace know something different. They know that the most important work often happens in the pauses, between the meetings, between the conversations, between the noise. In those quiet moments, the mind processes, integrates, and heals. Without those pauses, life becomes an endless stream of reactions, one event crashing into the next, with no space to actually absorb what is happening. Inner peace also requires the willingness to let go of old emotional baggage. Many people carry wounds from years ago as though they happened yesterday. A harsh word from a parent, a betrayal by a friend, a failure that left a mark. These experiences are real, and the pain they caused was valid. But continuing to carry that pain indefinitely does not protect you from future harm. It simply ensures that past harm never stops affecting your present. Releasing old pain is not the same as pretending it never happened. It is not denial. It is a conscious decision to stop allowing a past event to dictate your current emotional state. It is saying, that happened. It hurt. I learned from it. And I am choosing to set it down now because carrying it no longer serves me. This is not easy work, but it is among the most rewarding work a person can do, because every piece of old pain you release creates space for new experiences, new perspectives, and a lighter way of moving through the world. Another essential element of inner peace is protecting your mental environment. Just as you would not eat spoiled food and expect to feel physically healthy, you cannot consume endless negativity and expect to feel mentally calm. The conversations you participate in, the content you consume, the energy you allow into your daily life, all of it shapes your inner landscape. This does not mean building a bubble where nothing difficult ever reaches you. Challenges are inevitable and often necessary for growth. But there is a difference between facing challenges and marinating in unnecessary negativity. Being mindful about what you allow to occupy your mental space is not weakness. It is one of the most intelligent forms of self-care available. When inner peace becomes your foundation, it influences everything it touches. Your decision-making improves because you are thinking clearly rather than reacting emotionally. Your patience grows because you are no longer in a constant state of internal urgency. Your relationships deepen because people feel safe around your steadiness. And perhaps most importantly, your experience of ordinary life transforms. Moments that once felt mundane, a morning walk, a quiet meal, an evening without plans, begin to feel rich with a kind of contentment that no achievement or external event could manufacture. This quiet fire does not need anyone's permission to burn. It does not need applause or recognition to sustain itself. It simply needs your attention, your honesty, and your willingness to tend it daily. And once it is lit, it becomes the most reliable source of warmth you will ever know. Chapter 12. Becoming your own home. We have covered a lot of ground together. We have talked about the danger of building happiness on borrowed foundations. We have explored the invisible contracts that create unnecessary pain. We have discussed the freedom of accepting people as they are, the strength of emotional independence, the relief of not taking everything personally, the power of solitude, the depth of inner happiness, the beauty of caring without crumbling, and the peace that comes from releasing control. But if I had to distill everything into a single image, it would be this. Imagine spending your entire life searching for a home. You move from place to place, relationship to relationship, achievement to achievement, always hoping the next one will finally feel like the place where you belong. Some places feel close, some feel warm for a while, but eventually something shifts. A relationship changes, a circumstance evolves, a feeling fades, and you are back on the road, searching again. Now, imagine discovering that the home you were searching for was never a place, a person, or a circumstance. It was a state of being. It was the relationship you built with your own mind. It was the peace that comes from knowing, truly knowing, that you are complete without anything external propping you up. Becoming your own home means that no matter what happens in the outside world, no matter who leaves, what changes, or what does not go according to plan, you have a place inside yourself where you can always return. A place that is warm, stable, and entirely yours. This is not arrogance. This is not isolation. This is the deepest form of self-respect a human being can practice. It is the recognition that while other people can enhance your life, decorate your rooms, and fill your days with laughter, the structure itself, the walls, the roof, the foundation, must be built by you. When you become your own home, you stop searching frantically. You stop expecting other people to provide what only you can build. You stop measuring your worth against the attention you receive or the approval you collect. Instead, you settle into a quiet certainty that your happiness is not a fragile thing sitting on someone else's shelf. It is something you carry with you wherever you go, in every season, through every storm. And from this place, this grounded, self-sustaining place, you are actually able to give more to the world, not from depletion, but from overflow. You love more generously because you are not afraid of what happens if love is not returned in equal measure. You listen more deeply because you are not mentally calculating what you will receive for your attention. You contribute more freely because your sense of purpose comes from within rather than from external scorecards. Let me leave you with one final thought. At the very beginning of this video, I asked you a question. What if the person stealing your happiness is you? And now, after everything we have explored together, I hope the answer feels less like an accusation and more like an invitation. Because if you are the one who has been giving your peace away to expectations, to opinions, to the unpredictable behavior of others, then you are also the one who has the power to take it back. No one else needs to change for your life to feel different. No circumstance needs to align perfectly. No person needs to finally see your worth. The shift happens inside your own mind, in the quiet decision to stop outsourcing your emotional well-being and start building it from within. The less you expect from others, the more peaceful your life becomes. Not because people do not matter, they do, deeply, but because your peace was never meant to live in their hands. It was always meant to live in yours. And once you understand that, once you feel it, not just intellectually, but in your bones, a door opens, a door that was never locked, and on the other side of it, you find something you have been searching for your entire life. Freedom. Freedom from unnecessary disappointment. Freedom from constant emotional pressure. Freedom from the exhausting need to control what was never yours to manage. And in that freedom, a happiness that is quiet, steady, and completely, unshakably yours.